this is Ricey and welcome to my channel, The Quest for Wealth. The topic of this video is about the ins and outs of buying a property here in New Brunswick. And today we have got a guest. Join me in welcoming Dennis Wilson. Alright, hello everyone, and this is Dennis Wilson. Dennis, if you can introduce yourself to our viewers.
Hi, I work as a realtor here with Keller Williams Capital Realty on the Ryan Realty team. Just transferred over to there, and yeah, I'm from Greater Moncton. I grew up downtown and have been here all my life, and I love selling real estate. It's something that I'm really passionate about.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you been selling real estate?
It's been 3 years now, just over 3 years.
Mm-hmm. The first question, I guess, is if you compare the property market between 2018, 2019 until today, how do you think the heat of the market changed?
I think there's obviously a lot of factors there, but I think the one that comes to my mind the most, just for today's market especially compared to back then, is that in some parts of Canada, it's been difficult for investors to carry property and have a positive cash flow or a cash flow at all. And because of that, they're really zeroed in on Greater Moncton as one of the most sought after areas to purchase real estate as an investment.
For real?
Because of the cap rates and cash on cash flow are still actually very good compared to many other parts of Canada.
Okay, so are you saying that the purchasers in this in our province mainly are investors, really?
No,
Or,
not entirely, but there definitely are a lot of investors that are looking at our market as one of the better areas and sought after areas to be purchasing real estate as an investment. And then on top of that as well is it's a very we're growing quite quickly now. We're seeing a rapid growth compared to what Greater Moncton's used to, and that's attracted not only just investors but families to relocate to Greater Moncton to either start a business or just relocate in general, as you did.
Yep. So out of province investors mainly come from what? Ontario? Is it BC or Alberta?
I mean, the cliche thing is the answer is Ontario for sure. I mean, and it just happens to be a lot of investors that I work with are from Ontario, yeah, like we're very behind on real estate investing here compared to areas like Ontario. Markets have been, have been overinflated so much in a lot of areas in Ontario that it just doesn't make sense based on purchase price and potential income. It's just your ROI, your return on investment, is just not good in a lot of those areas. So they have to look at other markets, and there's not many markets left in Ontario that haven't been driven up high enough that it doesn't make sense to invest anymore.
I see. And when you talk about inventory of properties here in the province, how do you qualify that, or how you describe it?
I don't know for the province in general, but for Greater Moncton and southeastern New Brunswick, a balanced market is typically about 120 days, 4 months of inventory. And right now we currently carry on an average of about a month and a half of inventory.
Oh, so that's very low.
So 45 days. So we're still unbalanced. We're still in favoring sellers
It still is.
quite significantly, and as of a couple months back, it was even slightly worse. Probably looking at about a month, just over a month of inventory.
Okay. So when you say over a month of inventory, meaning the moment that the house is listed, it is closed within a month, or a buyer already closes it within a month? Is that what it means?
No. So the way I would come up with that number is I'd look at how many sold in a month.
I see.
And I multiply that by, say, like 1.5 months.
I see.
And that's where I'm getting what we currently roughly carry in inventory today.
Okay. In the market that we have right now, which kinds of houses or properties are more in demand? Are these the mobile houses, semi-detached, or detached houses?
Semi-detached houses would still be the most popular property, and it's because for its price, it's the cheapest way to get a turnkey home and
Yeah.
and a modern style home.
Yeah.
Not only is that attractive to first-time home buyers, but that's
Mm.
also very attractive to investors.
Yes.
So a lot of my investors like semi-detached properties because they carry a good cash flow. You typically
Mm.
rent to a family,
Yes.
and it's not as heavily needed for property management. Isn't as much needed. They can, you know, if they live locally, they can
Yeah.
usually maintain the homes a lot easier.
Semi-detached essentially rents to a family,
Right.
and it's a single-family household. And when you rent out a property, you are taxed almost twice, right? Or really twice as much.
Yes, so in Moncton itself, not Greater Moncton, but the city of Moncton, a property is taxed at owner occupied. It's taxed at 1.66%
Yes.
of its assessment value,
Mm-hmm.
and for a non-owner occupied property,
Sorry. And that's 1.66% of
assessed value,
Value,
right?
right.
So it doesn't matter, like,
Mhm.
if a property hasn't been sold in New Brunswick for a long time, that assessment value could be very low.
Yeah.
So for an owner, but once it's sold and there's a sold tract on that property, then it usually goes up quite significantly.
So my question was, given the fact that the taxation is higher when it comes to semi-detached, if you are to rent it out, do you believe that renting out or buying a property to rent out, which is a semi-detached, does it really make sense, or would a multiplex, which is a fourplex or a triplex, would that make more sense?
It really comes down to preference and type of property. Like, there's going to be some properties that are multi-units that could carry more time to be invested in the property,
Right.
more cost. It's really, I guess I'd leave that as it's really a case by case basis and what that investor prefers. I have some
see.
investors that love multi-units, and then I have also some investors that stay strictly to semi-detached properties.
All right. Nevertheless, investing in semi-detached really is not a bad thing either.
No, and I think one of the biggest reasons that a lot of my investors look at semi-detached properties is because they're just typically more turnkey, because they're usually a lot newer compared to the average triplex, duplex, or fourplex in Greater Moncton or bigger.
Okay. And when you say newer, what does that mean? 15 years, 20 years?
Yeah, like a lot of, I'd say the average age of a semi-detached property in Greater Moncton is probably about 10 to 15 years old.
All right.
Where-
And multiplex?
It could be, especially in the downtown core, like 50 plus years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And one thing that I notice about 50 plus years old is that they're not level. If you remember, they're not level. It's as if you're facing an earthquake all the time whenever you get inside the houses.
Yeah, there's a lot of property that have slight leaning, built in mid 1900s. I'm actually not sure exactly what happened there, but if you can tolerate that, a lot of the times, I mean, obviously the settling is completed. You're not going to have any further settling typically, unless you have some structural defects. But I mean, as long as the integrity of the structure is still there, right?
All right. In the Greater Moncton area, which community is most sought after?
I find like Moncton North and some areas in Dieppe typically are the most sought after areas for most styles of property, and a lot of it I find has to do with more modern housing.
Right.
So there's more semi-detached properties being built in those areas, and those areas usually cater to families well because they have more modern and more amenities for those families.
Most of the constructions these days are happening in the Moncton North, eh? There are some I've seen in Dieppe as well, but not as much as Moncton North, I think.
Yeah, like I find we have lots of construction taking place everywhere in Greater Moncton, really, especially with multi-units right down to single-family homes. It's exciting to see.
Yeah.
We're growing quickly, and investors are taking notice of that.
I think it was about 2 weeks before when Dennis told me about the idea of Memram Cook. that builders have started building in Memramcook?
Yeah, it's been for at least years. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was always kind of recognized as one of those more buyer markets before the market took a flip in 2020.
I see.
But it's still more affordable, and I see it as a great place to live.
Yeah. So aside from Riverview, Moncton and DF, Memramcook is becoming more in demand these days, would you say?
Yeah, like rural properties are very in demand, and I think what makes that happen is a lot of people coming from bigger provinces are used to living in outside the city limits because that's the most affordable real estate to buy.
Yes.
So for them to live, 15 minutes outside of Greater Moncton is nothing for them because it's common to have a longer commute.
Exactly.
So for them,
15, 20, even 30 minutes out of the city doesn't really matter.
And the most common thing I hear is they're so used to having that privacy, living on an acre lot, having, property that's farther away from their neighbors and more of a nature feel. They like that. That's something that they've started with in the areas they came from, and they enjoy it.
You have listed, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of houses in the last 3 years. I can imagine. So these days, between 2020 and 2021, or perhaps let's focus in 2021, when you lease a property, how long on average does it take before you are to receive an offer?
If a seller lists a house competitively, priced competitively in Greater Moncton and surrounding areas today, most of the time the seller is opening the doors from, on average, probably 4 to 6 days.
Wow.
And then reviewing offers after that, and typically multiple offers.
Mamma mia, so 1 week maximum?
Typically, yeah. And then
Wow.
and then if there's conditions on that offer, then you could be looking at roughly a 2-week condition period, and then it's usually
Only 2 weeks?
right. So
Wow.
4 to 6 days listed, review offers, up to 2 weeks for conditions, and then usually it's a firm sold. And
Jeez. So really, less than a month upon listing, done.
yeah.
Wow, but that's given if the buyer is pre-approved with mortgage. Is that correct, or?
Yes, get pre-approved.
Get pre-approved. Do not do any offers without getting pre-approved.
No, it's exactly.
And that brings me to the question about credit score. When you apply for a mortgage or pre-approval for a mortgage, normally, how much is the score that is, risk-free as to be considered by lenders?
Well, I'm no mortgage expert by all means, but I would say that I've seen clients that have been approved for mortgages as low as high 600s.
Okay.
And then I'm always told, it's probably a good benchmark is probably 700.
700. And you know how much is the mortgage rate on average?
I think they're still about 2% right now, about 2% flat. You might get a little bit better or a little bit higher, but that seems to be the market average right now.
Banks, is it better to discuss mortgage with a bank directly, or would you rather discuss with brokerage?
That's a good question. They're both great. Banks carry typically only their own products, and mortgage specialists, it's like an insurance broker. They shop many lenders and have many products, and that can be beneficial to whatever type of mortgage you may be looking to get.
So for people who are interested to buy semi-detached, detached, and mobile houses, how much do you believe is a reasonable budget for a 10 to 15, perhaps up to 20-year-old property?
For a mobile home, you're looking in the range, from 100,000 right up to new, going for 150, 160,000. And those are without land, so that would be in a leased land lot in a park.
And how much is the monthly rent normally, on average, again?
I'd say safely 350 would probably be about an average month lot rent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, when you rent a lot with mobile house, do you also pay tax?
Yes.
Alright, so
Yeah.
that's on top.
Yes.
And then insurance.
Yes.
And then why people buy mobile houses? I mean, you have to buy the mobile house, you have to rent a lot, and you'll never own it, and then you have to pay taxes. What's
The affordability, it's a good starter home, even though you have that, the purchase price being significantly less to get a brand new home for 150,000, 160,000 is
yeah.
unheard of in today's market. So
I see.
for someone that wants a very modern, newer home, would look at that option.
Okay. All right.
Semi-detached houses that are anywhere from new to 15 years old would be split entry semis start around 190 up to about, I've seen some sold for as high as 250, 260 split level.
Okay.
Very few at that price, but some have fetched that value. And for a two-story, it could go anywhere from starting around 230, 240, right up to as high as 350,000 or more. Yeah, depending if it has a garage, finished basement, how new it is.
And would it be the same average, would you say, back in 2020, or is it higher this time?
Oh, it's higher.
As soon as you enter the house, do you get a feeling on what are the possible renovations? What are the future problems of the house, or the current problems of the house?
On a newer home, when I go in, outside I'll always look at the grading of the lot. That's important. I'll look at the finishes, because a lot of the time the home is so modern, there's not much wear, but I'll just look at finishes, how the house was finished. Then also the type of material used inside, whether they used hardwood flooring on the main floor and stairs, or if a lot of it was just a vinyl click, and educate my client on that. Just the differences in value there are quite significant.
And hardwood is much more expensive, right?
Absolutely.
With the modern houses, do builders still use hardwood, or are they mostly clicks now?
A lot of builders still use hardwood in some of the property, and some will use it throughout a lot of the property. It just depends on the builder and the budget of the home.
Right, okay.
With older homes, I'll look at it more extensively. So when I walk up to the property, I'll look at the age of the roof, age of windows, material type of window. So if it's a vinyl window, the cost to change those are significantly cheaper, because you're usually just changing the glass.
Yes.
I'll look at doors, and also grading is important again. And then when I go inside the home, I'll look at how...
I'm sorry, grading?
The grading of the lot, so that it's grading away from the foundation.
Ah, I see. So then it is a slant. Really?
Right. So
all right. It goes out. Okay.
Right. You want to see some grading away from the home, just so that when in the spring you're not having a runoff into your foundation. You don't want it graded towards the foundation, especially.
All right. So then the water does not get into the foundation.
Right. It's going to come away from the foundation. As I go into the home, I'll look at how well the home has been kept, and I find as soon as you walk into a home, you usually can, just looking at floors, kitchen, bathrooms, you can usually get a good feel of how well that home has been kept. And I just educate my client on what I'm seeing and let them make a decision based on that.
Okay, so your non-negotiables are?
Well, I wouldn't say they're non-negotiable.
Okay.
But depending on the buyer, right? Because I mean, some buyers are okay with tolerating, especially in this market, repairing windows, doors, cosmetics. To get a good price in this market, a lot of the times you are tolerating some of those repairs.
Yes. Cosmetics is an easy thing to address, I mean, because it's just really the aesthetics, even from the outside or the inside.
Right.
But I find foundation is something that you can definitely that's non-negotiable.
Right, so I stick to certain experts in the city that if whatever they say is what, if I have a client that's interested in a home and it has some which are more serious, a horizontal crack, so like a
Yes.
flat crack,
Yeah.
then I'm gonna pass that information off to the
I
industry
see.
professionals that look at foundations, and they'll tell my client what's going on and the cost of repair.
I see. All right. So then, as long as the buyer essentially is willing to make that extra spend, I see what you mean. Mortgage rate between a rental property and a residential property, does it matter or does it make any difference? And as well, if you compare it to a mobile house, how do these things differ from one another?
That's a good question. It depends on the lender, because I'm seeing some lenders that are carrying mortgages with 20% down and have investors purchasing properties still getting better rates than someone that's buying a house with 5% down. And typically, when you put 20% down, your rate goes up,
Yes.
typically slightly up. So
And why is that? You should be risk-free already, right? Because you have more equity to the house, but then even you paid more and your rate goes higher than the 5% down payment. Why is that, do you think?
I'm gonna take a guess that it's because when you have 20% down, you're no longer carrying mortgage insurance on the home.
Yes.
So if you default on the home, it's completely on the risk of the lender. So because of that risk on the lender, I think that's why it goes up slightly, and it's not a lot,
And back to the question of the mortgage rates
right?
amongst mobile house, residential, and rental property.
I don't think that there's a clear answer on saying which one carries a higher rate.
Right.
The only difference I see typically is how much you're putting down reflects the rate, right? Because at any lender, if you're putting typically 20% as opposed to 5, 10, 15, anywhere in that
Okay.
range, it's usually going to go up slightly once you hit 20%.
I see. I have read some articles wherein in the US, if it is a rental property, then the mortgage rate is different from as compared to if you live in the property. So I was thinking, could it be the same case here?
Don't think, but like I said, I'm not a mortgage
Yeah.
expert, so
Yes,
I don't know for sure. I just know that percentages of down payment will impact it.
5% down payment is required
Right.
in the province or the whole of Canada
Yes.
when it comes to buying a property. Is there any way around it if a person wants to buy property but could not come up with a 5% down payment? Is that something that,
The only products that I'm aware of are cash back mortgages,
okay,
where you still need the 5% down payment, but with a higher interest rate, you receive the 5% cash back
I see.
after closing.
All right.
Right.
Okay.
So
So that's the only way to go around it.
as far as I'm aware, yeah. That's,
And to follow up on the closing, how much on average is the cost on closing
you're 2 to 3%.
of the purchase price?
Yeah, typically more of 3%. You have title transfer, which is 1%. Legal fees. You're going to have, depending on the time of year you're closing, you're going to have some taxes owed
Yeah.
on the property, and then usually there's some other fees that can be associated depending on many factors.
I see. Mm-hmm.
And you also, a lot of buyers won't factor in, you have your home inspection. A lot of the times right now you're paying for an appraisal.
Yeah.
So
So what's the difference between an inspection and appraisal?
no, so an appraisal is just for the bank to acquire the market value of the property,
All right.
and an inspection is to find out the condition of the
Of the
material and
property.
components of the home.
All right. And inspection on average is about 500 still?
Yeah.
And appraisal?
Same.
The same? Ah, okay. So one question for Dennis is a top tip when it comes to the mortgage.
I mean, obviously, as mentioned before, my top tip would be to be pre-approved, to ensure that you're well prepared financially for a mortgage before you go shopping. Make sure that when you sit down with a mortgage specialist or broker that you understand what your monthly costs are going to be associated with the property entirely.
Yeah.
So your taxes, your water bill, not just the mortgage.
Exactly, yeah.
The-
The true cost.
Right. So
Yes.
that's I feel like that can sometimes be a little bit of trickery. Like you
Yes.
just see what the mortgage costs are, but
Exactly.
there's
Yeah.
many other costs associated with being a homeowner or an investor.
And let us go through that list. So that's the true cost associated with being a homeowner are, first one is mortgage,
You'd have taxes
taxes.
in the city. For municipal, you'd have your water and sewage.
Mm-hmm.
You would have your insurance.
Yes. As Dennis mentioned, is that one of the tricky part of being a homeowner is that buyers sometimes only think about the mortgage and not the true entire cost of owning a house and even maintenance.
That's another good one, actually. I was thinking of it as I said. That's it. A lot of people don't think, like, if you're buying an older home, you're going to have to factor in some repairs, and
How much normally do you think on average?
it just really depends on what hasn't been renovated or upkept on the property you're purchasing. Really depends. Like, it's common to spend up to upgrade windows to vinyl. It's very common to spend $15,000 to $20,000.
Ooh.
A roof now, most roofs are don't get done for under $8,000 to $10,000 just on
Wow.
a smaller home.
Gee. And what I notice as I drive all the time around here is that the new roofs are already tin roofs now.
Well, steel roofs are a great option. It's just it's typically significantly more expensive than an asphalt shingle.
Mhm.
We just did our roof. I use an asphalt shingle. We were looking at steel, but it was
How much more expensive?
more than double typically.
But then when you have steel, that's
Good for life, I'm
Yeah.
told, but
yeah. But you're skeptic.
no, I'm not. I'm just it's just it's the
Yeah.
cost. It really came down to cost.
We are towards the end of our interview here. One of the most important questions that I would want to ask you are the qualifications or credentials of a real estate agent a buyer should look for.
That's a great question. I think the most common way that someone ends up in contact with a realtor is usually by referral. So I think that the best way is to reach out to your friends and family, and has someone had a great experience with a realtor?
What are your top tips to all aspiring buyers here in the province?
That's a great question. One of the first things that comes to my mind is to really make sure you know what type of property you want to buy. I feel like it's very common for me to be working with a buyer and we go through different styles and types of property before they realize what they actually really wanted.
I see.
And to add to that note, also to make sure that they're comfortable with the price that they may be paying for that property. Because nothing will be worse than either buying the wrong type or paying too much and having buyer's remorse. So I think it's really important to make sure they stay in their price range that they're comfortable with, and to make sure that they have the home that they like.
Okay. And the last question is, people are aware of the heat of the market that we have right now. And again, not only in New Brunswick, but the whole of Canada. Do you see this heat to come down anytime soon, in the next 6 months, 1 year perhaps, 10 months?
I definitely don't think we'll carry the same increase in value that we did in the last 12 months. A lot of the average properties have seen upwards to 30% increase in value over 12 months. So
Wow.
to repeat that again over the next 12 months, I don't know
Quite
if we'll
unlikely,
see
yeah.
that in Greater Moncton. I'm not an expert at other markets for sure, but I still see it. I still would say that I see increases for at least the near future.
All right, but not as much as 30%.
I don't think so. And one indicator for me is that we're slowly seeing inventory grow.
I see.
So I think if we continue to see that trend, then we're definitely going to see just a slight slowdown on how much that value is going up.
Yeah, but don't you think it is growing because it's summer? We just finished winter now, in the middle of summer, and then come winter again.
It could continue to rise, but like I said, that much traction, that's a lot of value.
Right.
We were used to seeing like 2% in Greater Moncton
It's quite
per
unreal.
year. So it's 15 times our average.
Exactly. That concludes our interview with Dennis today. So Dennis, if our viewers wanted to get in contact with you, how can they get in contact with you?
You can reach me. My phone number is 506-871-0223. My email is dennis.wilson@kw.com.
And he works for Keller Williams. Thank you very much indeed, Dennis. It was a long.
That was fun. Loved
It was
it.
great fun. I hope that you guys learned so much and gained value in this video. Thank you very much indeed, and I shall see you in the next video.